Thank you for tuning into my channel. We're working on our beginner sampler quilt, and today we're going to make the 9-patch block. So if you want to see how to make a quilt block like this, please stay tuned. I'm really excited to continue our journey in our sampler quilt for beginners. Last time we worked on this quilt, I made a 4-patch block. Here it is. I used a white background and a yellow accent fabric. 4 simple squares that are stitched together. And so to me, this is one of the simplest quilt blocks that you can make. If you haven't seen this video, I'll link it in the description so you can go back and take a look at it. Today we're going to try a new block. Instead of a 4-patch, we're going to be doing a 9-patch. And just like it sounds, a 9-patch is 9 squares that are stitched together in a certain scrappy design. I pulled some fabrics here, and before I lay it out, I do want to go ahead and cut these fabrics so that you can see how I do this. These are just 5 of my scrap fabrics. I hope they look nice together, and I just pulled them out of my scraps. And I was looking for a 6-inch size. I've already cut 6-inch squares from my background fabric. You'll notice this is the same as the 4-patch. And I'm going to use this hopefully throughout the quilt to give it some unity. And then now we're going to cut 1 6-inch square from each of these 5 fabrics. I'll zoom in a little bit just so you can see how I cut the fabrics. Since I'm going to be cutting 6-inch squares, I'm actually going to use my 6.5-inch square ruler to cut these pieces. If you're cutting from a larger piece of fabric, you might want to use a larger ruler, but for me, since these are relatively small pieces, I should be able to get my cuts with this ruler fairly easily. Okay, so all I'm going to do, let me grab my rotary cutter here, is this ruler actually has, it has 6 inches here and then here and an extra 1/2 inch around. And so I'm just going to line up to get that 6 inches and then I'll cut around it. So let's see how I do that. I need to pull this tape off. I have this tape on here for another project, but I'll pull it off. I don't absolutely need it. All right, so I'm just lining up here. Hopefully my corners on this one, my corners are already fairly square because I was using it for something else. And I'm just lining up the sides of the 6 inches. And my piece is, this looks like it was a piece for a mask, so it is already 6 inches wide. I'm just cutting, or 6 inches tall, I'm going to cut it down to get the square. And so for this particular one, I'm making 1 cut. And now I have my 6-inch square. I'm going to do the same thing for all of the other pieces. Hopefully I can get the 6 inches. I'll speed the video up here so you don't have to watch me cut these slowly, but that you will actually see what I'm doing. So I'm going to start speeding the video up here, and I'm cutting 4 more 6-inch squares. Let me show you where I'm kind of getting my inspiration for this sampler quilt from. This is the Block a Day book by Lucinda Ganderton, and it has 365 quilt blocks that you can kind of choose from. This is where I'm gaining my inspiration. I'm altering the blocks just a little bit. The book gives measurements to finish blocks at 12 inches, so they're 12.5 inches unfinished. I'm actually going for a slightly larger size. My blocks are going to be 16.5 inch unfinished and hopefully a 16-inch finished block once the quilt is put together. Last week I made the 4-patch, or last time I made the 4-patch block, and it's giant. I haven't measured it, but I started with 8.5-inch squares, and so hopefully it'll finish at 16.5. For this block, to get the 16.5-inch square, I'm starting with 6-inch blocks, so 6-inch squares. Hopefully each square will finish at 5.5 inches, which will give me the 16.5 that I'm looking for, depending on my 1/4-inch seam allowance. So there are several ways to lay this out. The way I'm going to lay it out first is a more traditional 9-patch where you alternate each row. So it would be like this. So it's going to be color, background, color. And then the middle row would be background, color, background. Okay. And the bottom row would repeat the top row. So color, then background, and then color. Okay. This is a very traditional layout. It could also go the other way where there are 5 background blocks and 4 color blocks. The book has this pattern in it, but then I noticed there's a different, a little variation on it that we're going to go with. We're actually going to go with this one right here. It's called the 9-patch cross. And so it moves all the background blocks to the corner, and the color blocks form a cross in the center of it. So I'm going to create that right now, and then we'll be able to go to the sewing machine and check it out. When you are making your 9-patch, you want to just put the blocks in a way that's kind of pleasing to your own eye. Whatever you think is best is going to be best. And so I'm gonna start with them like this, and then see how I like it. And you might want to take a picture with your phone just to make sure that it's something that you can kind of live with. It seems a little dark over here, so I'm going to move something. I think I'll put this one in the middle, and then like that. That's a little bit better for me. Let's see, what if we tried this? Maybe, but I think this is going to be the best. Okay, it is up to me. It's my quilt. When you put yours together, whatever you think is best is going to work. So now that I have my blocks laid out, or my squares laid out the way I want them, it's time to go to the sewing machine and stitch these together. I have my 9-patch laid out here on my table. If you have directional fabrics, you might want to make sure that they're all facing the same way. My butterflies are sort of directional, and my flowers in the orange are directional. So I'm just making sure that I know which way is up, so that when I put the whole quilt together, I'll know that I've put the block in right side up. Okay, to sew a 9-patch together, we're going to sew it in rows. So we're going to sew the top row, the middle row, the bottom row, not necessarily in that order. I like to do as much chain piecing as I can. So I'm going to just do these right over left, right over left, right over left, stitch these, and then come back and add the 3rd one on each row. Then we'll talk about how to press them, and we will finish some of the rows together. Now, as I'm getting ready to stitch on the sewing machine, I want to start my seams with a leader ender. These are just 2 pieces of fabric that I'm going to stitch together, so that when I put my real pieces in there, the machine doesn't eat them. So I'm just starting here with my leader ender. I have my 1/4-inch foot on my machine. I'm using my Coats & Clark 100% cotton thread. And to get it started, I'm just going to stitch down on my leader ender. Okay. And I'm not going to take that all the way out. I'm going to go ahead and go to my block, and I'm going to put the top two seams, top two pieces right over left, so I have my dark fabric on top of my background fabric. And I'm going to do the same thing, stitch a 1/4 inch here. And since I like to chain piece, I kind of have a very specific way to do this, but you could do whatever works for you. If you choose not to chain piece, that's fine, and you just want to sew the whole row at once, that'll work too. But since I'm going to try to chain piece, I have a way that I like to do this. Okay. Alright, now when I get to this point, I'm going to go ahead and cut off my leader ender and put it to the side. I don't need it right now. And I'm going to go to the next row. The middle piece is going to go right sides together with the left piece, and I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, after I do this one, we'll talk a little bit about pressing, because I am going to finger press this first before I take it over to the iron. So I'm going to go ahead and let the other piece finish first, leave a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to let the next two pieces go under the presser foot. Okay, same thing, 1/4 inch seam. Okay. Alright, so now we can talk a little bit about pressing, if you want to zoom out a little bit. For this block, we want to do the pressing away from the background. So when I'm putting this on my back on my cutting mat, I'm actually going to make sure that the dark seam allowance is under the dark fabric. And I'm just going to finger press. So I'm going to just drag my fingernail along that seam. Okay? And then I'm just going to put it back where it was in the block. Alright, from this point I'm going to go to my bottom row. The middle fabric is going to go right sides together with the left fabric. And same thing. Stitch, stitch, stitch. 1/4 inch seam. And if you choose, you could press after each seam. Absolutely, if you want to do that, that's fine. I'm just choosing to finger press until I have my whole block together. Make sure my sewing machine's working. Go, go, go. Okay. Alright, and then I'm going to take this one off. Now for the middle seams, since they're all color, then it really doesn't matter which way you press. I just want to make sure that my seams nest. So this seam is going to go in towards the center fabric, the top row. So I'm going to have the middle row seam go out. In this case, the middle row seam is going to point towards the yellow, and then it'll point towards the pink. So I'm just going to finger press this here, and it's all set. And now since I finished stitching all 3 of these seams, now I'm going to go and finish off each row. So for the top row, putting the background right sides together with that center color fabric. Again, doing the 1/4 inch seam. Okay. Alrighty. Stitch, stitch, stitch. 1/4 inch. And I'm just I stopped it with the needle down so that I can line up the bottom of each fabric. Okay. And now I take this one off, and since this one has the backgrounds on the outside, I'm going to again press towards the center fabric, which is my color fabric. Okay. Now I'm going to finish the center row. And when I pull the my top row off, again I'm going to finger press the seam toward the center because it's that color fabric. And if I want to, I could just go ahead and straight down and stitch the bottom. I think I'll do that just so you can see that. Take off the extra threads. Okay. All right, now if you wanted to at this point, once you get done with that third row, once you have all the rows sewn, if you want to, you can do another leader ender here. So I could do another leader ender here, or I can do what I'm actually about to do. I'm going to do finger press these top two rows. Again, the top and the bottom seams are going to be pressed in. Okay, and the middle seam is going to be pressed out. Now, in the spirit of chain piecing, I'm going to now go ahead and put the top row over the middle row and go ahead and line up the seams. This is kind of a large seam, so you can pin. I am going to pin. I'm going to first pin the top edge here. And in quilting, it's easier for me if my pin is perpendicular to the seam, so I have it pointing towards where the seam is going to go. Same at the bottom. Okay. Alrighty. And then I'm going to try to line up these seam allowances so that we get a nice nest. And you don't really have to pin this, but if you're a beginner, you may want to start with pinning, and then gradually you'll get more confident and you won't have to pin as much. But there are some quilters who choose to pin every single time. I'm not one of them, but I am taking the time to do that on this seam. Okay, and so right now, again, I'm just lining up the seam allowances so that I can see that they're going to nest. And there may be other ways to do this too. This just seems like a simple way to make sure everything is lined up how I want it. You can add more pins, you can add less pins. That's completely up to your preference and what you feel like your skill level is. Okay. Now I'm going to put these longer pieces in at the machine, stitch them down, and then I will have to grab another leader ender. Actually, probably two more. Alright, so here we go. And as you get to the pin, you want to take it out. You don't want your needle running over your pins. It could break your needle. Okay. As I come to the pin again, and these pins aren't close to the edge, but just to be safe. Okay. Go. Okay. Almost done with this seam. And in order for me to get to my next leader ender, I actually have a little bin full of tiny pieces of fabric, and I'm just going to pick two of those at random to use. And they're going to be a part of blocks that we make called crumb blocks, which are just tiny pieces stitched together. Okay. So I'm going to take out the last pin here. Okay, and scroll down. just grabbing 2 random pieces out of this thing. And then I'm going to stitch them together. And ideally I would look for pieces that kind of match up, but they don't absolutely have to match up. This is just for the video. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to take off both of the pieces that I've been working on. This one is the bottom row, and it's going to go, we're going to finger press that toward the center. And then here are the top 2 rows, and I think I'm just going to finger press those down. It doesn't matter, it could be up or down, whatever your preference is. I'm just going to press them down. Okay, and I tried to match up my seams. One of them matched and the other one didn't, and I can live with it, so it's all good. And I'll show you when the whole thing is done, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, now I have I'm going to stitch the bottom row up to the top 2 rows, and I'm going to go through and pin again. Again, you don't have to. Maybe I'll try this one without pinning and see what happens. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to, I'm only paying attention right now to from the top of the fabric to that first join of the seams. So let's see. Here we go. So I'm going to take a couple of stitches and leave the needle down, and then I'm just kind of holding my fabric where those 2 seam allowances are going to meet. Okay, so that I can feel them nesting with my fingers. Okay. And I'm stitching and still trying to hold it. Okay, now I have it in that one. And so now I'm just going to go down to the next seam allowance, and I'm just kind of holding it in place as I stitch. Again, just holding it there. And now I'm going to hold just the bottom ends of the fabric, just kind of keeping them together to finish out the stitch. Still holding it down. Okay, and now I will grab 2 more leader enders. Just grabbing randomly out of my little stack here. And I'll stitch them together. Okay, last bit. And then we'll have a finished block. After I stitch these, we'll meet at the iron so we can see how to put these together. I have the 9-patch block on the ironing board. It's time to press it. And just like the 4-patch block, I'm going to press it 3 times. I'm going to press it from the top and just make sure all the seams are, make sure it looks flat like I want it to. Okay, top first. And it doesn't fit on the ironing board, that's okay. I'm just going to slide it down here, and I'm just going over, I'm just making sure the seams are nice and flat, and the quilt block is as flat as I would like it to be. Alright, then I'm going to turn it over and double check the seams, make sure that they go the way I want them to. In this one, I did a good job with the seams. Okay. Oh. Okay. And just pressing it. Alright. And then I'm going to press it one more time from the top, just to make sure. Oh, it's nice and flat. I like it. All right. So here is the finished block. I really am happy with the way it turned out. I was a little concerned about the scrappy fabrics, but I think they look okay together in this block. Again, I used the background fabric that was the same, and I used this yellow to hopefully give the blocks a little bit of continuity. I'll at least try to use these two fabrics in every block that we do, but we'll see if it works out. There is one seam that I want to show you. And it's this join right here. Camera, let's put it on the table here. This little join right here did not make it perfect. Okay, but the other ones did really well. I found that when I did not pin down here at the bottom, that my seams lined up perfect. When I tried to pin, I kind of botched one up a little bit. So for me, pinning did not work in this particular block. All right. So again, I'm happy with the way this turned out, and I am excited about continuing this beginner quilt journey. If you have any questions about what you've seen in this video, please leave them in the comments below. Remember to thumbs up this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any more of the beginner's quilt. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.